What roster moves will we see this week? Which D lineman may be cut? Now, his actual question, I had to truncate it for putting it up on the screen, but I'm going to read the actual question here so you get how full and formed this question was by Moses P. He asked, who will be released, waived, sent down to practice squad before this week? Adding Omenihu brings our D-line total up to 12 guys, and Kittle will be back, plus Greenlaw and Wilson, at least one of those two. Which two D linemen do they cut off? It's going to be between Kerr, Givens, Hurst, and Key. Again, great question, Moses. Really complete. Love the thoroughness of that as you come in. Let me give you a thorough answer. As of yesterday, the 49ers gained 4 open practice squad spots. And how they did that was Kai Nassau on IR with the hamstring. I'm sure I'm butchering his name, but one of our backup cornerbacks with the hamstring injury went on IR. And they released Nate Gary, Jaquez Patrick, and Eddie Yarbrough. All 3 of those released from the practice squad. They made room for Charles by releasing linebacker Tyrell Adams from the active roster. And then the practice windows that open up this week are for George Kittle, which there is a reasonable expectation that Kyle Shanahan set today. He plays against Arizona on Sunday, so he'll be back. Robbie Gould, absolutely he expect that he will play this week against Arizona because of the cut that came to Joey Sly. So they freed up the roster spot for Robbie Gould by waiving Sly this week. And then Jeff Wilson Jr., that's fantastic news to get back for 49er faithful. It does seem that he's doubtful this week, but hopes are that next week he will be activated. So we don't need to clear a spot for him. It doesn't sound like Dre Greenlaw's practice window is going to be opening up this week. Not until next week, according to Kyle Shanahan in his presser today. Transactions we made signing people to the practice squad. Linebacker Tyrell Adams, after cutting him from the 53, brought him back to the practice squad. Linebacker Christian Ellis. Wide receiver Austin Watkins Jr. Some of you may recognize that name. He was a previously undrafted free agent signing that the team got in after the draft. I have high hopes for this young gentleman, and I'm glad to see him back on the practice squad. And then they signed veteran safety Will Parks to the practice squad as well. I would expect that this week, Tony Jefferson may be elevated if Jimmy Ward is out as expected with his grade 1 quad strain that occurred last Sunday. There's an outside chance that he plays this week, according to Shanahan, but it would seem highly doubtful that he would. So it would seem that the 49ers may only need to open up a spot for George Kittle. If a D lineman were to get cut in order to free that up, and I would say that really is a big if, considering how the 49ers really like to stockpile players at the D-line position. It's got to be one of the guys on the 1-year deals, obviously. So here are the guys that are signed through next season and therefore not on 1-year deals. The only defensive linemen signed beyond this year: Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Dee Ford, Javon Kinlaw, Samson Ebukam, and now Charles Omenihu as well, signed through 2022. I wouldn't be surprised if none of these D linemen are cut and the 49ers continue to use short-term IR as a way in which to basically stash players who have lesser injuries. They've done it to this point, and as long as you're willing to come up against the salary cap and pay those players, it's a viable way to keep additional bodies with the new rules in place for COVID-19. So I would say that it's possible with Hurst's lower leg injury, the calf injury, you could tuck him on IR for 3 weeks and count on that idea that injuries do mount up in this league, and there are probably additional players going on IR at some point where he can then come off without having to drop someone who then gets claimed on waivers. For me, though, if you're holding me to the fire and forcing me to cut one, I'm deciding between Zach Kerr and Arden Key. Those are the two choices for me. Twist my arm, and it's Arden Key for me. At 330 plus pounds for Kerr, he's a big body, and the 49ers do not have very many of those, in particular after Javon Kinlaw going on to IR. Kerr is not performing terribly well with a 53 Pro Football Focus grade and 1 tackle on the season. Wouldn't be a huge loss, but I still think there's upside there. I still think the 49ers would rather keep him.